They told Elena that an Omega without a pack is a dead woman walking. They told her the winter woods would claim her bone and marrow before sunrise. They were wrong. The cold didn't kill her, and the solitude didn't break her. Because when the sun went down that night, Elena wasn't alone. She lit a fire to keep the frost at bay, but she ended up summoning something else entirely. Not a monster, not a savior, but 20 sets of golden eyes staring from the darkness. This is the true story of the night the rejected girl became the queen of the ghosts. December 14th, Blackwood Ridge. The sound of a mate bond snapping isn't poetic. It doesn't sound like a harp string breaking or glass shattering. It sounds like a wet tear deep inside the chest, followed by a silence so loud it makes your ears ring. Elena Vance stood in the center of the Silver Creek, gathering haul, her knees trembling against the polished hardwood floor. She was 22, with hair the color of dried wheat, and eyes that were currently red-rimmed and burning. She wasn't looking at the floor, though. She was looking at him, Alpha Marco. He sat on the velvet-tufted chair that looked too much like a throne for a small-town pack leader. He was handsome in that sharp, jagged way that cut you if you got too close. Black hair jawline like a weapon, and eyes that held absolutely no mercy. "Elena Vance," Marco said, his voice carrying effortlessly over the crowd of 300 pack members. "By the laws of Silver Creek, and by the right of the Alpha bloodline, I hereby reject you." The crowd didn't gasp. They had known this was coming. In the real world of pack politics, love didn't matter. Bloodlines did. And Elena's father, a man named Silas Vance, had been accused of embezzling pack funds 3 days ago. He had fled, leaving Elena to pay the debt with her life and her status. "Marco, please," Elena whispered. It was a humiliating sound, desperate and thin. "I didn't do anything. I didn't know." Marco stood up. He walked down the 3 steps of the dais, his Italian leather shoes clicking rhythmically. He stopped inches from her. He smelled of cedar and expensive scotch, the scent that used to be her home. "It doesn't matter what you knew, Elena," he said low enough that only the front row could hear. "You are Vance blood. That makes you poison, and I will not have poison in my bed or in my nursery." He raised his voice again. "I strip you of your rank. I strip you of your name. You are rogue. You have 1 hour to clear the territory line at Blackwood Ridge. If you are found within our borders after sundown, the order is kill on sight." The brutality of it was efficient. No trial, no defense, just the Alpha's word. Elena didn't scream. The shock was a heavy blanket that suffocated her reactions. She simply nodded a jerky mechanical motion. She turned around. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. But instead of water, it was a wall of faces she had known her whole life. Her high school chemistry teacher, the baker who made her birthday cakes, her best friend, Sarah. Sarah looked down, refusing to meet Elena's eyes. That hurt more than the rejection. Elena walked out of the hall and into the biting wind of a Colorado December. She didn't go home to pack. She knew Marco's enforcers would be waiting there to strip search her for stolen goods. She had the clothes on her back, a thin denim jacket, a flannel shirt, jeans, and worn-out boots. She started walking. The hike to the territory line took 4 hours. By the time Elena crossed the invisible barrier that separated Silver Creek from the lawless wildlands, the sun was bleeding out against the horizon, painting the snow in shades of violent violet and bruised orange. Her feet were numb. Her hands were tucked into her armpits, but the shivering had passed the violent stage and settled into a dangerous, sluggish rhythm. Hypothermia was knocking. She found a small clearing beneath the overhang of a massive limestone cliff. It offered shelter from the wind, though not the cold. "Okay," she muttered to herself, her teeth clacking. "Okay, Elena. Survive the night. Just survive the night." She gathered wood with clumsy frozen fingers, dead pine branches, dry needles. She had a lighter in her pocket, a cheap plastic thing she kept for lighting candles at the diner where she used to work. It took 10 tries to get a spark. When the small flame finally caught the dry pine needles, Elena let out a sob she had been holding in since the gathering hall. The fire grew. It was a pathetic, smoky thing, but it was heat. She curled up as close to it as she dared, wrapping her arms around her knees. The darkness of the forest was absolute. In the city there is always ambient light. In the wild lands, the dark is a physical weight. She stared into the flames, replaying the look on Marco's face. He hadn't just looked indifferent. He had looked satisfied, like he had been waiting for an excuse to get rid of her. The realization twisted in her gut. Was her father really a thief? Or was he just the convenient scapegoat to clear the way for a more politically advantageous mate for the alpha crack? The sound of a heavy branch snapping echoed through the clearing. Elena froze. Her wolf, usually a comforting presence in her mind, was silent, beaten down by the rejection trauma. She was effectively human right now. "Who's there?" she called out. Her voice cracked. Silence. Then the sound of breathing, not the light, fluttery breathing of a deer or a rabbit. This was deep, wet, lung-rattling breathing, the sound of something massive. Elena scrambled backward, her back hitting the cold limestone wall. She grabbed a burning branch from the fire, holding it up like a sword. "I said, who's there? I have a weapon." A low growl vibrated through the ground. It didn't come from one direction. It came from everywhere. From the darkness beyond the firelight, a shape emerged. It was a wolf, but to call it a wolf was an insult to the species. This creature was monstrous, easily the size of a pony. Its fur was matted and scarred, black as pitch. One ear was torn completely off. It stepped into the circle of light, its lips pulled back to reveal teeth that looked like serrated daggers. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. A rogue, she thought. A feral rogue. This is how I die. But the wolf didn't attack. It stood there, watching her. Then another stepped out from the left. This one was grey, missing an eye, walking with a heavy limp. Then another, and another. They poured out of the tree line like oil spilling across water. Massive, scarred, battle-worn beasts. They didn't look like a pack. They looked like a graveyard that had been dug up. 5, 10, 15. Elena pressed herself flat against the rock, the burning branch shaking in her hand. She counted 20 of them. 20 apex predators, forming a perfect semicircle around her and the fire. They weren't looking at the fire. They were looking at her. The massive black wolf, the one with the missing ear, took a step forward. He was so close, she could smell him pine resin, old blood, and rain. He lowered his massive head, bringing it level with her face. Elena squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the teeth. Waiting for the end. She felt a puff of hot air against her cheek. Then a wet nose nudged her hand, the hand holding the burning branch. She gasped, dropping the wood. It hissed in the snow. She opened her eyes. The black wolf wasn't biting her. He was sniffing her tears. He let out a huff, a sound that was almost human in its exasperation. Then, to Elena's absolute shock, the massive beast turned around, putting his back to her. He lay down in the snow, curling his massive body around her left side, creating a living wall of fur and heat. The grey wolf with the limp did the same on her right. One by one, the 20 wolves collapsed onto the snow. They didn't attack. They didn't scavenge. They formed a tight, interlocking ring around her and the fire. They were blocking the wind. They were blocking the view from the woods. Elena sat there, stunned, sandwiched between two lethal predators who were currently radiating more warmth than her dying fire. The black wolf shifted, resting his heavy chin on her ankle. A low rumble went through his chest. Not a growl, she realized. It was a purr, a deep guttural sound of contentment. Elena looked around the circle of monsters. These weren't just rogues. The coordination was too perfect. The silence was too disciplined. She reached out a trembling hand and hesitated, then buried her fingers into the thick, coarse fur of the black wolf's neck. He didn't flinch. He leaned into her touch. Tears, hot and fresh, spilled down her cheeks. She had been rejected by the high society wolves of Silver Creek, cast out by the man she loved. Yet here in the freezing dark, a pack of nightmares had decided she was worth keeping warm. But as Elena looked closer at the black wolf's neck, her breath hitched. There, hidden beneath the matted fur, was a patch of skin branded with a symbol. It was a circle with a slash through it. She knew that symbol. Every wolf in the country knew that symbol. It was the mark of the Lost Legion, the military unit of shifters that had been sent on a suicide mission across the ocean 5 years ago. The government said they had all died, every single one of them. Elena pulled her hand back, her blood running cold for a different reason. These men were supposed to be dead, and the black wolf, the alpha who was currently warming her feet. If the stories were true, that would be Klaus Thorn, the most dangerous shifter who had ever lived. The wolf opened one golden eye and looked at her. It was a look of profound intelligence. "You're safe," the look seemed to say. "For now." But Elena knew better. She wasn't just safe. She was sitting in the middle of a conspiracy that could burn Silver Creek to the ground. The sun didn't rise so much as it bruised the sky, turning the black canopy of the forest into a dull, aching grey. Elena woke up with a gasp, her body jerking upright. Her hands immediately flew to her throat, expecting the feeling of teeth or the stinging cold of the snow. Instead, her fingers brushed against heavy, coarse wool. She blinked, disoriented. The fire was dead, reduced to a circle of wet, black ash. The wolves, the 20 monsters that had formed a living barricade around her, were gone. The clearing was empty, but she wasn't freezing. She was wrapped in a thermal blanket. It wasn't a hiking blanket or something you bought at a sporting goods store. It was olive drab, heavy, and smelled of gun oil and old storage. Stenciled in the corner in fading black ink were the letters US Gov, prop of 107th Battalion. Elena stared at the text, her breath misting in the air. The 107th. The Lost Legion. She stood up, her legs stiff. Beside the dead fire lay a rabbit. It had been skinned and gutted with surgical precision, laid out on a flat rock like an offering. Next to it was a canteen made of battered metal. She wasn't alone. She was being kept. "Eat," a voice said. Elena spun around, nearly tripping over the heavy blanket. Leaning against a birch tree 10 yards away was a man. He was massive, easily 6'5", with shoulders that strained the seams of a black tactical shirt. He wore cargo pants that had been patched a dozen times and heavy combat boots. But it was his face that stole the air from Elena's lungs. It was a ruin of a face. 3 thick, pale scars ran diagonally from his left temple down to his jaw, cutting through his eyebrow and narrowly missing his eye. His hair was black and shorn close to his skull military style. He looked dangerous. He looked like a war crime waiting to happen. He was Klaus Thorn, the man whose picture had been on the news 5 years ago. The war hero. The martyr. "You're dead," Elena whispered. It was the only thing her brain could formulate. "I saw your funeral on TV. The president gave your mother a flag." Klaus pushed himself off the tree. He didn't walk. He prowled. Every movement was calculated efficiency. He stopped 5 feet from her, invading her personal space with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "My mother is dead," Klaus said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated in Elena's chest. "She died thinking I was a hero. Better she believes that than the truth." "Which is," Elena asked, her voice shaking. "That we were sold," Klaus said. His golden eyes, the same eyes of the black wolf, locked onto hers. "We weren't killed in action, Elena Vance. We were sold to a private research firm by our own command. We spent 3 years in cages. 2 years ago we broke out. We've been hunting the men who sold us ever since." Elena took a step back. "Why are you telling me this? If you're ghosts, you can't leave witnesses. Are you going to kill me?" Klaus laughed, but there was no humor in it. It was a sharp, barking sound. "Kill you? We spent the last 8 hours keeping you from freezing to death. If I wanted you dead, I would have let the frost take you." He gestured to the skinned rabbit. "My second-in-command Elias prepared that for you. He's the grey wolf with the limp. He thinks we should leave you at the nearest highway. He thinks you're a liability." "And what do you think?" Elena asked, lifting her chin. Despite the fear, a spark of defiance flared in her chest. She had lost everything yesterday. She had very little left to lose today. Klaus tilted his head, studying her. "I think a woman who gets rejected by Marco Sterling and walks into the wild lands without shedding a tear has iron in her blood. I smelled the bond break, Elena. It tasted like ash. I know what it's like to be thrown away by the people you served." He took a step closer. "You have nowhere to go. Silver Creek has marked you as a rogue. If you go back to civilization, the Council will track you down because of your father's debts. You are a ghost now, just like us." Elena felt the weight of his words crash down on her. He was right. She had no money, no pack, no ID. She was a non-person. "So what happens now?" she asked quietly. "Now," Klaus said, extending a scarred hand toward her. "You have a choice. You can walk to the highway, try your luck hitchhiking to Denver, and likely end up dead or in a cage within a week. Or you come with us," Klaus said. "We have a camp. It's warm. There is food. But if you come with us, you work. We don't carry dead weight. We are soldiers, Elena. We are at war." Elena looked at his hand. It was large, calloused, capable of violence, yet he held it open in an offer of salvation. She looked back toward the direction of Silver Creek, the home that had spat her out. Then she looked at the thermal blanket around her shoulders. She reached out and took his hand. His grip was warm and solid. "I'm not a soldier," Elena said. Klaus's lips quirked in a grim half-smile. Not yet. The camp wasn't a tent city. It was an abandoned Cold War missile silo, buried deep within the granite heart of Blackwood Ridge. The walk took another 3 hours. Klaus moved through the woods with unnatural speed, and Elena had to jog to keep up. Occasionally, other wolves' massive, silent shadows would flank them, checking for threats, before melting back into the trees. When they reached the entrance disguised by a massive fallen redwood and a holographic projection net, Eleanor realized just how sophisticated this operation was. They descended a rusted spiral staircase into the earth. As they went deeper, the air grew warmer. The smell of pine was replaced by the scent of ozone coffee and male sweat. The main chamber was a cavernous concrete room filled with scavenged tech. Monitors lined one wall displaying satellite feeds, drone footage, and encrypted chat logs. In the center of the room was a massive map of the state of Colorado, covered in red markers. There were men everywhere. Some were lifting weights in a corner gym made of scrap metal. Others were cleaning high-caliber rifles. They stopped when Klaus walked in with Elena. 20 pairs of eyes fixed on her. The silence was heavy. "At ease," Klaus commanded. The tension didn't break, but the men went back to their tasks, though their eyes kept darting to the intruder. "This is the Legion," Klaus said, sweeping his arm across the room. "The men the world forgot." A man with a grey buzz cut and a prosthetic leg limped over. It was the grey wolf from the night before Elias. He looked at Elena with undisguised suspicion. "Klaus," Elias grunted. "This is a mistake. She's a civilian. Worse, she's Sterling's ex. She could be a plant." "She's not a plant, Elias." Klaus said, his voice hard. "Marco publicly rejected her yesterday. I saw the energy signature myself. She's clean." Elias spat on the concrete floor. "She's soft. Look at her hands. She's never held a gun or a knife. She's a waitress, Klaus." "What is she going to do here?" "Fold our laundry." Elena felt a flush of anger rise up her neck. She stepped out from behind Klaus. "I was the head of logistics for the Silver Creek Harvest Festival for 3 years." Elena said, her voice ringing clear in the concrete echo chamber. "I managed inventory for 300 wolves. I know how to balance a ledger. And more importantly," she walked up to the map on the table. She pointed to a red marker labeled Supply Route A. "Your intel is wrong," she said. The room went dead silent. Elias narrowed his eyes. "Excuse me. You have this route marked as a primary supply line for Silver Creek," Elena said, tracing the line with her finger. "But Marco shut this road down 2 months ago. There was a landslide. They're using the old logging road through the valley now. If you ambush a convoy here, you'll be waiting for ghosts. The real shipment, the silver, the weapons, is moving 3 miles east." Elias looked at the map, then at Klaus, then back at Elena. He grabbed a tablet and tapped furiously for a moment, pulling up a fresh satellite image. He zoomed in. "Damn it," Elias whispered. "She's right. The thermal signature on the logging road is hot. The main road is cold." He looked at Elena with a new expression. It wasn't respect yet, but it wasn't dismissal either. Klaus crossed his arms, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "She stays." 2 weeks later. Life in the silo was a brutal routine. Elena wasn't treated like a princess. She was treated like a recruit. She woke at 5:00 a.m. Physical training was mandatory. Klaus didn't let her slack off. He made her run stairs until she puked. He taught her how to throw a punch, how to use a knife, how to disarm a man twice her size. Your wolf is weak because you rely on it, Klaus told her one afternoon during sparring. He swept her legs, sending her crashing onto the mats. He stood over her, breathing hard, sweat glistening on his scars. If they suppress your wolf with wolfsbane, what are you? You have to be dangerous without the beast. Elena groaned, wiping blood from her split lip. She glared at him. Again. Klaus smirked, helping her up. The electricity between them was growing. It wasn't soft or romantic in the traditional sense. It was the heat of friction. He challenged her, and she rose to meet him. But the real work happened at night. Elena took over the Legion's logistics. She organized their food rationing, optimized their fuel usage, and helped analyze the intel they gathered on the local packs. She learned that the Legion wasn't just hiding. They were planning a coup. The man who had sold them out wasn't just a random general. It was a coalition of alpha leaders who wanted to privatize the military's shifter assets. And the head of that coalition in this region was none other than Alpha Marco Sterling's father, Richard Sterling. Elena's rejection hadn't just been about her father's embezzlement. It was about cleaning house. The Sterlings were preparing for a war, and they needed to consolidate power by marrying Marco to the daughter of a neighboring warlord. Elena was just debris in the road. One evening, Elena was sitting in the mess hall staring at a decrypted email on her laptop. Klaus sat down across from her, placing a metal mug of coffee on the table. "You're staring at that screen like it insulted your mother," Klaus said. Elena didn't look up. "This email, it's from Marco to his father. They're planning a winter solstice gala next week." "We know," Klaus said, taking a sip of his coffee. "We're planning to hit the perimeter security, cause a distraction, steal some tech." "No," Elena said, finally looking up. Her eyes were intense. "That's small time." Klaus read the guest list. "The senator is going to be there. The man who signed your death certificates." Klaus froze. He leaned in, reading the screen. His jaw tightened until a muscle feather in his cheek jumped. "Senator Holloway." "If he's there," Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He'll have the override codes for the military containment units, the ones you said your other brothers are still trapped in." Klaus looked at her. "We can't get close to Holloway. The gala is inside the Alpha's mansion. The security will be airtight. We can't breach it without a massacre, and we don't kill civilians." "You can't breach it," Elena agreed, "but someone on the inside could." Klaus shook his head slowly. "No, absolutely not." "I know the house, Klaus," Elena said, reaching across the table to cover his hand with hers. "I lived there for 2 years. I know the servants' entrance. I know the blind spots in the cameras. I know how to blend in." "Elena, they will kill you," Klaus growled. "Marco rejected you. If he sees you—" "He won't see Elena Vance, the rejected mate," she said. "He'll see a catering server, or a cleaner. I can get in. I can get the codes from the senator's phone. And I can get out." Klaus pulled his hand away, standing up abruptly. He paced the small room, running a hand over his scarred face. He looked like a caged animal. "I didn't save you from the snow, just to send you back into the fire," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Elena stood up and walked to him. She placed a hand on his chest, right over his heart. It was beating furiously. "You saved me so I could live," she said softly. "But this is how I get my life back, and how you get your justice. We do this, Klaus. We do this together." Klaus looked down at her. For a moment the soldier vanished, and only the man remained. He looked terrified not of the mission, but of losing her. He brought his hand up his thumb, grazing her cheekbone. "If you do this," he whispered, "I am going to be your shadow. I will be on the comms every second, and if anyone touches you, I will burn Silver Creek to the ground." Elena shivered not from cold, but from the raw power in his voice. "Deal," she whispered. Klaus leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. "Then get ready, Elena. We're going to a party." December 21st, the Winter Solstice Gala. The Silver Creek Manor was a fortress disguised as a palace. Situated on the highest peak of the territory, it glowed against the night skylight pouring from every window like molten gold. Inside, the air smelled of roasted duck expensive perfume and the underlying metallic tang of shifter pheromones. Elena adjusted the collar of her stiff white catering uniform. Her hair was dyed a severe black and pulled into a tight bun. She wore colored contacts that turned her hazel eyes a dull, unnoticeable brown. She held a silver tray of champagne flutes, her knuckles white as she navigated the crowded ballroom. "Breath check." Klaus's voice crackled in her earpiece. It was a tiny military-grade receiver hidden deep in her ear canal. "Pulse is 120, Elena whispered, barely moving her lips as she offered a glass to a wealthy beta woman. "I'm in the main hall. Target is at 2 o'clock. "Copy that," Klaus replied. His voice was calm, anchoring her. "Remember, you are a ghost. You don't look them in the eye. You are furniture. Get to Holloway, clone the phone, and get out." Elena moved through the crowd. It was surreal. 2 weeks ago, she would have been a guest here. She would have been wearing a silk gown standing by Marco's side. Now she was invisible. She saw him. Alpha Marco stood near the grand fireplace. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes that even the dim lighting couldn't hide. He held a tumbler of scotch like it was a lifeline. Next to him stood his new intended mate, Vanessa. She was the daughter of the Northern Alpha, a tall, statuesque blonde with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She had her hand on Marco's arm, a gesture of possession that made Elena's stomach turn. Elena Klaus's voice sharpened. "Focus. Don't look at him." "I know," she breathed. She turned away from Marco and zoned in on Senator Holloway. The senator was a corpulent man with a red face and a loud, booming laugh. He was holding court near the orchestra, bragging to a circle of sycophants. His suit jacket was unbuttoned, and there, sticking out of his inside pocket, was the outline of his phone. Elena took a deep breath. She had a device in her apron pocket, a near-field scanner Elias had cobbled together. She just needed to get within 6 inches of the phone for 10 seconds. She adjusted her tray and approached the circle. "Champagne, Senator?" she asked, pitching her voice low and rough. Holloway didn't even look at her face. He just reached for a glass. "Finally, service in this place is slipping." As he reached, Elena stepped into his personal space, feigning a stumble. She bumped into him, her apron pocket brushing against his chest. "Watch it," Holloway barked, shoving her back. "I am so sorry, sir." Elena gasped, bowing her head. "My heel caught the rug." Scanning. Elias's voice cut in over the comms. Hold it. 40%, 60%. She needed to stall. She grabbed a napkin and began frantically dabbing at a non-existent spot on his jacket. "Let me clean that for you, sir. I am so clumsy." "Get off me, woman." Holloway swatted her hand away. 90%. Done. We have the codes. Get out of there, Elena. Relief washed over her. "Again, my apologies," she muttered, backing away. She turned to leave, heading for the service doors. She was halfway across the room when the music stopped. "And now," A voice boomed over the microphone. It was Marco's father, Richard Sterling. "A toast to the future union of Alpha Marco and the lovely Vanessa." The crowd cheered. Elena froze. She shouldn't look. She knew she shouldn't look, but she couldn't help it. She glanced back at the dais. Marco was raising his glass, but his eyes were scanning the room. He looked restless, agitated. His wolf was surfacing. Suddenly his head snapped toward her. Across the sea of 300 people, his eyes locked onto the back of her head. He couldn't see her face. But the wind had shifted. The heavy doors to the terrace had opened, creating a draft that blew her scent directly to him. Even under the dye, the catering smells, and the fear she was his mate. Or she had been. The bond was severed, but the memory of the scent remained. Marco dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor. "Elena!" he roared. The room went deadly silent. Abort Klaus yelled in her ear. "Run! Now!" Elena didn't hesitate. She dropped the tray of champagne, the crash echoing like a gunshot, and bolted for the service door. "Stop her!" Marco screamed, jumping off the dais. "Guards, seal the doors." Elena burst through the double doors into the kitchen. "I'm burned!" she screamed into her mic. "They're on me!" "We're coming," Klaus growled. "Get to the extraction point, the North Garden." Elena sprinted past confused chefs, knocking over a rack of pots and pans to create an obstacle. She could hear heavy footsteps pounding behind her. She burst out the back door into the freezing night air. The North Garden was a maze of frozen hedges and statues. She ran her lungs burning, slipping on the icy cobblestones. She reached the center fountain. "There!" a voice shouted. 3 of Marco's enforcers dropped from the balcony above, landing in front of her. They shifted mid-air landing as massive wolves, 1 brown, 2 russet. They snarled, blocking her path. Elena skid to a halt. She turned around. Marco was standing at the garden entrance human, but his eyes were glowing bright red. "I knew it," Marco panted, walking toward her. "I smelled you the moment you walked in. Why are you here, Elena? Did you come to beg?" He laughed, a cruel, jagged sound. "You look pathetic in that uniform. Did you really think you could steal from us?" Elena reached into her apron and pulled out the only weapon. She had, a ceramic knife Klaus had given her. "I didn't come to beg, Marco," she said, her voice trembling, but loud. "I came to take what you stole." Marco sneered. "Grab her! Don't kill her! I want to know who helped her!" The 3 enforcer wolves lunged. Elena braced herself for the impact, raising the knife. But the impact never came. Boom! A flashbang grenade detonated in the center of the garden. A blinding white light seared the night, followed by a deafening crack. The enforcer wolves yelped, scrambling back, blinded and disoriented. From the top of the 12-foot garden wall, shadows descended. They didn't fall. They struck. Klaus hit the ground first. He was in his hybrid form, humanoid, but with claws, fangs, and eyes like burning gold. He didn't shift fully. He needed his hands. He caught the first enforcer wolf in mid-air, slamming the beast into the stone fountain with a sickening crunch of bone. "Legion!" Klaus roared. "Secure the target!" 5 more figures dropped into the garden. Elias, in full wolf form, tore into the second enforcer's flank. The other legionnaires, dressed in tactical black gear and wearing night vision goggles, opened fire with tranquilizer darts. It was chaos, controlled military-grade chaos. Elena felt a massive arm wrap around her waist. She looked up to see Klaus. "I told you," he snarled, pulling her behind him. "I'm your shadow." Marco, shielding his eyes from the flashbang afterimage, stared in horror. He looked at Klaus, at the scars, the sheer size of him, the military movement. "Thorn," Marco whispered, his face draining of color. You're dead. My father said you were dead." Klaus stepped forward, the ceramic knife Eleanor had held now in his hand. He looked like a demon rising from the pit. "Your father lied," Klaus said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble. "And now, we're coming for him." More Silver Creek guards were pouring out of the mansion. Sirens were wailing. "We have to go," Elias barked, throwing a smoke grenade at the feet of the approaching guards. "We have the package. Move!" "You're not leaving!" Marco screamed. He shifted. His wolf was large, a sleek, well-groomed grey, but compared to Klaus, he looked like a domestic dog. Marco lunged at Klaus, aiming for the throat. It was a mistake. Klaus didn't even shift fully. He sidestepped with impossible speed, grabbing Marco by the scruff of his neck and using the Alpha's own momentum to slam him face first into the frozen earth. Klaus pinned Marco down, his claws digging into the Alpha's neck, drawing blood. "I could kill you right now," Klaus whispered into Marco's ear. "I could rip your throat out and end your line. But you aren't worth the stain on my claws." He released Marco and shoved him away. "Eleanor, move!" They ran. They sprinted through the garden maze, vaulting over the back wall. A black van was waiting on the logging road, engine idling. They dove inside. The door slammed shut. "Go, go, go!" Elias screamed from the passenger seat. The van peeled out tires, spinning on the ice, just as the Silver Creek security team reached the road. Bullets pinged off the back of the armored van, but they were already gone, disappearing into the darkness of the wildlands. 1 hour later. The bunker. The adrenaline crash was brutal. Elena sat on a crate in the med bay, her hands shaking so hard she couldn't hold a water bottle. Her mind was replaying the look on Marco's face, the shock, the fear. Klaus walked in. He had washed the blood off his hands, but he still radiated a dangerous energy. He walked straight to her. "Ma, are you hurt?" he demanded, scanning her for injuries. "No," Elena whispered. I'm okay." "Did we get it?" Elias limped into the room, holding up a flash drive. A rare grin split his scarred face. "We got it. The override codes, the locations of the Black Site labs. Everything." "We can free them," Elena said, a smile breaking through her shock. "We can free your brothers." "Yes," Klaus said. He looked at Elias. "Give us a minute." Elias nodded and left, closing the heavy blast door. Klaus stood in front of Elena. The silence stretched between them, heavy and electric. "You disobeyed orders," Klaus said softly. "I told you to run the moment the music stopped." "I had to get the scan," Elena argued feebly. "You could have died," Klaus said. He reached out his hand, cupping her face. His thumb traced her lower lip. "When I saw him look at you, when I saw him recognize you," he let out a shuddering breath. "I have never been afraid in combat, Elena. Not once. But tonight, I was terrified." Elena looked up into his golden eyes. She saw the truth there. This wasn't just a partnership anymore. It wasn't just gratitude. "Why?" she asked. "Because," Klaus murmured, leaning down until their foreheads touched. "You are the only thing in this world that makes me feel like I'm not a monster. You are the fire in my winter." He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, tentative kiss. It was desperate. It tasted of danger, of survival, of a bond that was forging not through fate but through choice. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, anchoring herself to his strength. For the first time since her rejection, the hollow ache in her chest was gone. It was filled with fire. Klaus pulled back, resting his forehead against hers. "This changes everything. They know we're alive. They know you're with us. The war has started." "Good," Elena said, her eyes flashing. "Let them come." December 24th. Christmas Eve. The world was celebrating. Families were gathering around fireplaces, drinking eggnog and opening gifts. 10 miles outside of Denver, deep in the industrial wasteland of the Iron Mountain sector, the Lost Legion was preparing for war. The decrypted files from Senator Holloway's phone had given them everything: the location of the containment facility, the shift rotations, and the override codes for the electric collars that kept the remaining 50 members of the 107th Battalion subdued. "It looks too clean," Elias grunted, checking the magazine of his assault rifle for the 3rd time. He was looking at the schematics on the tactical table. "Light security. Minimal heat signatures. Sterling knows we hit the gala. He knows we have the codes. Why isn't this place a fortress?" Klaus tightened the straps of his tactical vest. His face was a mask of cold determination. "Because he thinks we're animals. He thinks we'll rush in blindly to save our pack. He doesn't respect us as soldiers." He turned to Elena. She was sitting at the comms station, a terrifyingly complex array of monitors inside the mobile command van, parked a mile from the target. "Elena," Klaus said, his voice softening, "you are the eyes. If anything feels wrong, you pull the plug. We abort. Understood?" "Understood," Elena said. She was wearing a headset, her eyes scanning the drone feeds. "Bring them home, Klaus." "Legion," Klaus commanded. "Move out!" The infiltration began silently. The outer gates opened with the stolen codes. The cameras looped perfectly. Klaus and his squad of 20 moved through the sterile white hallways of the laboratory facility like smoke. They reached the containment wing. Rows of glass cells lined the walls. Inside, men sat in various states of despair. Some were pacing. Others were curled in corners. They were gaunt, scarred, broken. "Disable the locks," Klaus whispered into his comms. The heavy magnetic locks hissed and disengaged. "Brothers," Klaus shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. "The war is over. You're going home." The men in the cells looked up, confusion turning to disbelief, then hope. They stumbled out, embracing the rescue team. Klaus Elena's voice screamed in his ear, so loud it made him wince. "It's a trap, thermal spike." Everywhere, clang. Heavy blast doors slammed shut on both ends of the hallway, sealing Klaus, his team, and the 50 prisoners inside a concrete box. Vents in the ceiling hissed open. A thick yellow gas began to pour in. "Wolfsbane," Elias choked, covering his mouth. "Masks, masks on." "Well, well," a voice boomed over the intercom. It was Richard Sterling. "I knew you'd come for them. You dogs are so predictable." Inside the command van, Eleanor watched in horror as the thermal readings of the enemy began to swarm the building. "They're surrounded," Elena whispered to herself. She typed furiously, trying to hack the blast doors. Access denied. Hardwired override. She looked at the enemy movements on the drone feed. Richard Sterling had deployed a private mercenary company outside. They were setting up a kill box at the only exit. But as Elena watched the red dots of the enemy moving, something clicked in her brain. They weren't moving like soldiers. They weren't using suppressing fire positions or flanking maneuvers. They were moving in a crescent formation. They're herding, Elena realized aloud. They're using the wolf hunt. It was an ancient traditional strategy used by packs to hunt deer. You scare the prey out of the den, funnel them into a narrow valley, and slaughter them at the choke point. Richard Sterling was arrogant. He wasn't treating the Legion like a military unit. He was treating them like wild beasts. "Klaus!" Elena shouted into the mic. "Listen to me. Do not blow the south door. I repeat, do not blow the south door." Elena. Klaus coughed, his voice strained. "We have to get out." "The gas is rising. The south door is the choke point," Elena commanded, her voice turning into steel. "That's where the guns are waiting. Sterling is using the crescent hunt. He expects you to run from the gas." "What do we do?" "Blow the floor," Elena said. "The schematics show a drainage system for the chemical waste directly under you. It leads to the river 2 miles east. It bypasses their entire line." There was a pause. "That's a 50-foot drop, Elena." "You're shifters," she yelled. "You can take the fall. It's the only way." Inside the gas-filled hallway. Klaus looked at Elias. He nodded. "Charges on the floor," Klaus roared. "Center mass, blow it." 3 seconds later, a massive explosion shook the facility. The floor of the containment wing collapsed. 70 super soldiers dropped into the darkness below, vanishing just as the mercenaries breached the south door guns, raised only to find an empty hallway and a gaping hole in the ground. Elena slumped back in her chair, letting out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for a lifetime. "Checkmate, Richard," she whispered. December 25th, Christmas morning. Silver Creek was silent. The snow was falling in heavy, soft flakes, covering the world in white. Alpha Marco stood on the balcony of his manor, looking out over his territory. He held a cup of coffee, but his hands were shaking. He hadn't slept. The news from Iron Mountain was confusing an explosion, a breach, but no bodies found. "Sir." Marco turned. His head of security was running across the lawn, pale as a sheet. "What is it?" Marco snapped. "The woods," the guard stammered, pointing toward the tree line. "The woods are moving." Marco looked. At first he saw nothing, just the grey trunks of the pine trees. Then a pair of golden eyes opened in the shadow. Then another, and another. Dozens, scores. From the mist they emerged. Not 20 wolves, not this time. 70 massive, battle-hardened beasts stepped onto the manicured lawn of the Silver Creek estate. They moved in perfect military silence. No howling, no growling. Just the rhythmic thud of hundreds of paws on the frozen earth. At the front of the formation walked Klaus. He wasn't in wolf form. He was human, dressed in his black tactical gear, armed not with a gun, but with a sword he had taken from the wall of the bunker. And walking right beside him, her hand resting lightly on the back of a massive grey wolf, Elias was Elena. She wore a heavy winter coat, her hair loose and wild. She didn't look like the rejected girl who had left this house in tears 10 days ago. She looked like a queen returning to claim her throne. Marco gripped the balcony railing. "Call everyone!" he screamed. "Defend the house!" But as the Silver Creek pack members poured out of their houses, they didn't attack. They stopped. They stared. They saw the lost legion. They recognized faces, uncles, brothers, fathers. who were supposed to be dead. That's my brother," a woman in the front row whispered, dropping her weapon. "That's Lieutenant Miller," an older man said. "The Legion wasn't an invading army. They were the lost sons of the Pack." Klaus stopped 10 yards from the balcony. He raised the sword and pointed it at Marco. "Marco Sterling." Klaus's voice was amplified by the silence. "Your father sold us. You abandoned us. And you rejected her." He gestured to Elena. Elena stepped forward. She looked up at the balcony, locking eyes with the man who had broken her heart. "You said I was poison, Marco." Elena called out, her voice clear and strong. "You said I was weak. But while you were drinking scotch and planning parties, I was saving the men you left to rot." She pulled a tablet from her coat and held it up. "I have the evidence. The bank transfers from Richard Sterling to the research labs, the death certificates he forged. It's all been uploaded to the council database. Your father is finished." The front door of the manor burst open. Richard Sterling ran out, a pistol in his hand. "Kill them!" Richard screamed, waving the gun wildly. "They are traitors! Attack!" No one moved. The Silver Creek wolves looked at their alpha, then at the Legion. "I said attack!" Richard shrieked. He aimed the gun at Elena. Bang! But the shot didn't hit Elena. Klaus had moved faster than sight. He had thrown the sword. It pinned Richard Sterling's shoulder to the heavy oak door frame behind him. Richard screamed, dropping the gun. Klaus scaled the trellis to the balcony in 2 leaps, landing in front of Marco. Marco shifted instantly, his grey wolf snarling, snapping at Klaus. Klaus didn't even shift. He caught Marco's wolf by the throat with one hand, lifting the thrashing beast into the air. With his other hand, he punched the wolf hard in the snout, a disciplined, brutal strike that stunned the alpha. He threw Marco over the balcony railing. Marco crashed into the snow below, whining, defeated. He shifted back to human form, naked and shivering in the snow, coughing up blood. Klaus jumped down, landing softly beside Elena. He looked at the gathered crowd of Silver Creek wolves, 300 of them. "Your alpha is corrupt," Klaus said calmly. "Your former alpha is a traitor. The Legion has returned. We are taking command." He looked at Elena. "And this," he said, taking her hand and raising it high, "is the one who led us home. She is not a rogue. She is the savior of the Legion." Slowly, the woman who had recognized her brother knelt in the snow, then the older man, then the guards. One by one, the entire Silver Creek pack dropped to one knee. They weren't bowing to Klaus alone. They were bowing to Elena, the rejected Omega, the girl who sat by the fire. That night, the great hearth in the gathering hall was lit. It wasn't a small, pathetic fire made of pine needles. It was a roaring blaze that warmed the entire room. The hall was filled with laughter, tears, and reunions. Men who had been gone for 5 years were holding their children for the first time. The boundaries between Silver Creek and the Legion had dissolved. They were one pack now. The Iron Pack. Elena sat in the Alpha's chair, the velvet throne she had once been rejected in front of. Klaus stood behind her, his hand resting possessively on the back of the chair. He leaned down, his lips brushing her ear. "You know," he whispered, his voice low and teasing. "Technically, since I claimed the pack, I'm the Alpha. That makes you the Luna." Elena smiled, leaning her head back against him. She looked at the fire. She remembered the cold. She remembered the fear. And she looked at the 20 wolves, now 70, who would die to protect her. "I don't need a title, Klaus," she whispered back, turning to kiss him. I have a pack. Klaus smiled to the scars on his face stretching, making him look not like a monster, but like a man who had finally found peace. To the Queen of Ghosts, he said, raising a glass. To the wolves in the winter, she replied. Outside the snow continued to fall, burying the past. But inside the fire burned bright, and for the first time in a long time the night was not cold. And that, my friends, is the story of Eleanor and the Lost Legion. From a rejected outcast, freezing in the snow, to the Queen of the Iron Pack. It just goes to show sometimes when the world turns its back on you, it's just clearing the way for the family you were actually meant to find. I want to know what you think. Did Marco deserve to be exiled, or should Klaus have finished him off? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new romance drama. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.